Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into everything? The fire, the energy, the oxygen, and then one day you left and suddenly that room had nothing. That's the power you absence. But let me tell you something, you more know the value of their absence because they don't know the value of their presence in the first place, and that ends today. We live in a world where availability is meek insignificance. Think about it. How many times have you bent over backward to be there for someone only to be overlooked, underappreciated, or completely taken for call? You reply to every message. You show up early, stay late, carry burdens that aren't yours to carry. And yet, the more available you are, the least you're valued. Why? Because when something is available, people stop seeing its value. It becomes normal, expected even invisible, like air. Expected even, it's gone. Your presence, your energy, your time, your love, your wisdom, your attention is a gift, a rare and precious thing. But somewhere along, we started believing that being good meant always being available, always saying whys, always being the one others count on. That might feel noble in the moment, but slowly, when it slowly depletes your soul as a convenience rather than a blessing. Let me take you into a story that's so common, like your own. Imagine a young woman, let's call her May. She's the kind of person everyone leans on. Her phone rings at 2 a.m. She picks up. Her coworker needs help finishing a project he's slacked off for a week. She stays late to fix it. Her friend forgets her birthday. She forgives it, smiles, and see, Maya believed her value came from always being there, from being liked, from being needed. But slowly, she started to notice something more. Her boss expected her to fix other people's mistakes. Her friends only called when they wanted something. Her boyfriend never made play. Her kindness became a currency that everyone is spending, and no one was replenishing. And the saddest part, she blamed herself for feeling empty till Dad didn't pick up the phone. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. She turned it off. She went for a walk alone. She breathed. She cried. And for the first time in a while, she asked herself a radical question. What would happen if I stopped giving my energy to people who don't value it? That one question changed everything. And all of us have to learn, when you give your presence to people who treat it like it's disposable, you end up depleted. You teach others how to treat it. Every time you say, it's fine, when it's not everly drained. Every time you ignore your gut in favor, keeping the peace, you are writing a silent agreement that says, my value is negotiable, but it should be everyone's backup plan. You are not here to be someone's emotional punching bag. You are not here to constantly pour from your dry. Your presence is a limited edition, not a clearance item. Not everyone should have access to it. Not it was your argument, but because you are intentional, you must protect your presence the same way your valuable possessions, because in truth, it is your most valuable possession. Think of it like this. If you gave someone a beautiful wrap, never missed a day, how long before they stop opening with excitement? Maybe a month. Eventually, maybe they might not even unwrap it. They might assume inside. They might even get irritated when you don't bring it. Maybe now imagine you stop giving it for one day. When it's truly meaningful, you hand it to them. This time they pause, they notice, they open it with gratitude. That's what happens when you reserve, honor, not just consume. So look around your life today. Look at the people you could call, you get the places where your effort goes unnoticed. Look at patterns where your yes is automatic and your no feels like betrayal. And then church, if I started treating my presence like the sacred gift it truly is, this isn't about cutting people off in the cord of self-neglect. It's about creating space for the people who do see you, who do appreciate you. Maybe they're not who line you walk into the room, but then because you're you. When you stop giving your presence to those who treat it like it's free, you begin to attract those who will choose her. And that is when your life transforms. So don't shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. Don't keep showing up for people who leave who you are. Remember the power you carry, because your presence is a gift. And it's you're treating it like one, but it starts with you. Have you ever found yourself constantly proving, constantly doing, just to show someone your worth? You bend over backward, you go out of your way. You make sure they never feel your absence, and if you stop showing up, they'll forget you. They move on. But here's the raw truth, people. Raw, you're always speaking. They remember it when you're quiet. Let me share a story. Not a dramatic one, but a painfully familiar one. They worked in a small company, one of those where everyone wears 10 hats and gets recognized for none. He was the go-to guy. Call Ravey down, client cries, call weekend email. Rave would answer it. Everyone relied on him, but no one really saw him. He talked a lot, not to boast, to make sure people noticed. He'd work with reports prepped, stats ready, ideas bubbling. He'd speak up, volunteer, help others shine. But despite all that, when promotion came someone less involved, someone who showed up only when it mattered. Ravi was crushed. Don't they see how much I do? He asked to hear me. And that's the problem. They heard him, but they didn't feel him. His voice was always there. His effort was always available, so it faded into background noise. But after that disappointment, or maybe something unexpected, he stopped talking, not out of... He didn't quit or throw a tantrum. He'd explaining. He stopped volunteering for everything. He let his results speak instead. He sat back and watched. He made his presence felt by his up slowly. People noticed. Hey, where's Ravey's insight? Oh, but by now, the room started missing his contribution. Because for the first time, there was space to feel it. That's the power of silence, you see, when you're making. Even with good intentions, people stop listening. Not because you're not valuable, because they never get the contrast. You ever becomes assumed, not appreciated. Expected, not acknowledged. When you pull back, even just your silence becomes a presence. Let's take it out of the workplace and into relationships. Maybe you're always texting first, always being the emotional anchor. You're trying so hard to show someone they matter, to keep the connection alive. You think that if you stop talking, you forget you. But the truth is, it forgives. They forgive the moment ago they never value you in the first place. Sometimes your silence doesn't push them up. It's in the silence that people begin to ask questions. Why haven't they reached out? Was I taking them for granted? In the silence, people are forced to reflect. In the silence, your absence becomes the loudest voice. Down silence with manipulation. This isn't about playing games. This is about knowing your worth so deep you'll need to constantly prove it. You don't need to chase validation. You don't need to over-explain, over-defend, or over-deliver. You need to trust that opportunities, the right energy will always find their way to the space you leave behind. Look at nature. Even a thunderstorm needs silence before the rumble. Even the ocean pulls back before it sends a wave crashing to the shore. Even a heartbeat has a pause. Silence is not emptiness, it is space. Space for truth. Space for recognition. Think about the people who impacted your life the most. Some of them probably weren't in your face every moment. But when they weren't around, you felt it. Their silence carried weight. Their absence powerful. Why? Because they mattered. They just did. And that's what I want you to understand today. You don't need to fill every moment with nouns. You don't need to constantly be the loudest voice to be the most important presence. Sometimes stepping back is what finally allows your rise to the surface. So the next time you feel tempted to prove yourself one more time, to push your worth into a space that doesn't seem to recognize it, try silence. Let the echo of your absence do the talking. Let the quiet speak your truth. Because people may forget what you said and they did, but they will never forget how it felt when you stopped speaking and they realized you were never just noise. You were the signal. There's a quiet moment in every person's life, a turning point, where they realize that the reason keep getting disrespected isn't because people are cruel. It's because they've allowed it. Not twice, but repeatedly. Not because they thought being kind meant tolerating bad behavior. That loving someone meant accepting their flaws, no matter the damage. That stayed of the peace. But here's the truth no one teaches us when we're young. Respect isn't earned by how much you can tolerate, but by what you walk away from without guilt. Imagine this scenario. A young man named Arjun works in a team where his idea is overlooked. He speaks up in meetings, but no one listens. A few minutes later, someone else says the same thing, and suddenly it's brilliant. He's asked responsibilities, yet his contributions are minimized. He tells himself, maybe if I work harder, maybe if I'm more agreeable. So he keeps tolerating it. He stays quiet. He doesn't push back. He thinks respect will eventually be given the bigger person. But days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and nothing changes except his confidence shrinking. Not because he isn't capable, but because the silent agreement he signed was this: you can treat me this way, and I won't leave. Then something to stay late. He declines the extra task. In the next meeting, he simply says, I'll pass. That silence hits suddenly. They ask, everything okay? For the first time, he doesn't sugarcoat it. He says, I feel like my voice isn't Vari to keep showing up like that. That one moment of courage, of saying no, of drawing the line, commands more respect than analogies or explanations ever did. Because people don't respect what you endure, they respect what you walk away from. This doesn't just happen at work. Think about that friend on your reach who only reaches out when they need something. The one who disappears when you need them, magically reappears when they want you to excel. That's just how they are. You make excuses, you tolerate it, not because it feels right, because you're afraid of losing respect. What you're really losing is self-respect. When you continue to tolerate patterns that chip away at your worth, you teach people that they can always be there, that your silence means consent, that your it's okay means dot it again. And yet, the moment you walk away, not with energy, the energy shifts. Suddenly that friend starts realizing what they lost. Suddenly they notice that their phone isn't Lime your name anymore. And even if they never come back with an apology, your decision becomes a mirror they can't ignore. Because walking away isn't a weakness. I know my value and this doesn't align with it. Let's talk about relationships, the romantic kind. You might love someone deeply, but love, you can give your heart, your time, your loyalty. But if they talk down to you, dismiss your emotions, maybe that was your old story, mock your dreams, or cross your learn that your love can be taken for granted. But the moment you pack your bags, metaphorically or literally, and say, I love you, but I love myself more, that's the moment and far more powerful than any fight or pleading could. You teach them that your self-respect is not for sale. And maybe they change. Maybe it is. The point had changed. You choose yourself. Respect is never demanded. It's demonstrated not with words, but with actions. Not with how bodily you leave when something no longer serves your peace, your growth, your role, your worth. People are watching you. Not in a parental way. They learn how to treat you based on how you treat yourself. If you constantly allow little jabs, disrespectful tones, manipulation issues brushed off as nothing, you teach them they can keep doing it. But if one day you say, that doesn't work for me, and you actually it means being alone, even if it means uncertainty, then you teach the world the standard. And here's the most beautiful part: once he's your way away from things that shrink you, you start walking toward things that expand you. Better friends, better relationships, better opportunities, better peace suddenly appeared, but because you created space for them by leaving what no longer served you. So the next time you ask, why don't they respect me? What they've been tolerating. And remember, respect begins where tolerance ends. Let your abs from disrespect be louder, the discomfort. Walk away, not because you're giving up. Walk away because you're growing up. There comes a time in life when words nations fall flat, when justifying yourself feels like shouting into the void, and when silence becomes your final, most powerful statement. Because as a word says more than hours of conversation ever could. Sometimes your absence becomes think about it. Think about the last time someone important in your life went quiet. Maybe it was a friend, a partner, a mentor, someone who used to skulk up, be present, and then one day they were just gone. No goodbye, no long message, just absence. And suddenly, their silence echoed. You felt the shift, wondering where it turned. You felt the weight of what was lost, not because they said anything, but we say paradox. We're taught to speak up, to explain, to defend our choices. But the truth is, when someone doesn't value your words, it finally makes them listen. Take the story of Isha, a brilliant, soft-spoken woman who had spent years in and was constantly unheard. She would express her needs, her feelings, her dreams, only to be met with indifference or defay. If she said it more clearly, more gently, more calmly, maybe then he'd understand. Maybe then he'd listen. So she kept talking, but nothing changed. Explained, babe. She didn't cry. She simply packed a bag and left a note. And this silence is everything I couldn't say. She didn't blame. She just left. And that note, that silence, finally did what actions couldn't, because her absence spoke of the exhaustion, the neglect, the unmet needs, and the unspoken pain. Maybe it told the whole story without becoming desensitized to noise. The more you speak, the more they assume there's always more coming. But when you go quiet, when you remove Quion, that's when they realize the gravity of your presence. That's when your absence becomes thunder. Let's take it to a more everyday example. With their parents, they raise their voice, they push boundaries, they expect everything while giving little. The parent tries to reason, explain, juice it. Instead of another lecture, the parent simply steps back. No argument, no guilt trip. They say, when you're ready to talk with respect, I'm here. And at first, the teenager feels triumphant. But over time, that absence, the missing voice of guidance, of structure, of love, starts to gray head. They realize that once annoyed them was actually love showing up every day. And in that silence, reflection begins. Or think about the workplace. There's a quiet team together. They glue the quiet. They do the work, smooth over tensions, uplift others, because they're not loud. They're off for granted until they resign. And suddenly chaos. Project stall, team dynamic shift, leadership scrambles. Why? Because the person they did there, and now their absence is speaking volumes. Because here's the truth. Your absence reveals what your words see. It shows them that your presence wasn't random. It was foundational. That your energy held the room together. That your kindness wasn't weakness. And most importantly, it shows that you know you're worth enough to leave when it's no longer seen. We're often afraid of silence. People will misunderstand. But here's something powerful. You are not responsible for how they interpret your silence. Your job is to live in alignment with your truth. And sometimes that truth doesn't need to be spoken. Maybe that was needed, to be honest. Your silence been done to say. It means you've said enough. It means the conversation has shifted from words to actions. It means your energy is no longer of oil to appreciate it. And that's where the transformation happens. Not just for others, but for you. Because in your silence, you reclaim your peace. In your absence, you find your power. And the people who are meant to stay in your life, they'll hear your silence as clear as you feel your absence like a missing heartbeat. So you've been talking, explaining, defending, pleading, and nothing changes. That was you've given up, but because you've grown up. Let your absence say what your voice no longer needs to. Because sometimes the most powerful way to be heard goes silent, and sometimes the loudest thing you can dog is leave. Sometimes we get so caught up in staying in relationship, staying in the friendship, staying in the pattern, that we forget the power of leaving. Not in anger, not in waste, because always mean giving up. Sometimes it means giving everyone, including yourself, the space to finally see things coil, emotionally noisy. We fill every corner of our lives with effort, with trying harder, giving more, fixing what isn't ours to fix. We think that the more we can save. But the truth is, some things don't reveal themselves until you let them breathe. And that only happens when you step away. Let's talk about Remy, a smart, compassionate woman who was in a long-term relationship that felt safe, comfortable, but not fulfilling. Over time, she noticed she was always initiating conversations, keeping the spark alive. She thought, if I just keep giving it my all, he'll realize how much I love him. So she stayed through missed birthdays, unanswered messages, cold silences. And every time she thought about leaving, what if he finally realizes what he is after I go? What if he never does? But deep down, nothing was going to shift when she was still here doing all the work. And so one day she left, not with anger, not with blame, but with peace and space. What happened next was powerful. Fred saw the gap. He felt the silence. He noticed what was missing, her energy, her attention, her effort, the things he had grown used to, not had removed from the room. And in that vacuum, clarity rushed in. He had to face the truth. Not just about her, about himself. But here, the rarity didn't just come for him. It came for her too. Because the moment she stepped out of the motion, constant trying, she began to see more clearly. She realized how much of herself she buried trusting was something that was already letting her go. She saw how one-sided things had become, How quiet our own needs had become in for someone else. You see, sometimes the only way to hear your own voice again is to step away from the crowd. Sometimes the only way someone else can hear when it's not interrupted by your presence. When you're in the middle of something, especially something emotional, you're too close to see it for what it really is. Maybe it's like trying to read a book that was your face. You're overwhelmed by details, but blind to the big picture. Distance gives you perspective, and perspective gives you clarity. This is true in friendships, in work, even with family. How many of us keep showing up in situations that drain us, hoping things will magically improve, hoping into systems, relationships, habits, just because it's what we've always done? But nothing can shift, nothing grow until there's space. Space allows discomfort, and discomfort leads to truth. When you leave, when you pause, when you retreat, maybe that was your old story. When you stop over-explaining, something incredible happens. The people around you are forced to step up or step away. You stop carrying the entire emotional weight. Others have to decide, were they ever really holding anything, or were they just leaning on you? And most importantly, you get to decide without all the noise who you are, what you need. So many people are afraid to walk away because think that leaving means losing. It's the opposite for growth. It's like a garden that's been overplanted. Too many seeds, not enough soil. Everything is choking, everything spews things out. When you create space, what remains can finally breathe. The roots can stretch. The sun can reach them. That's what your absence can do. For you, people won't appreciate what you do until you stop doing it. Sometimes they won't realize the weight and terror you put it down. Sometimes you won't realize how far until you sit in silence without distraction. But when you create space, you create clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity is clarity about who's truly there for you, not just out of habit, but out of heart. So don't be afraid to leave. Not forever, not always, but long enough return to yourself, because when you duck, you don't come back needing approval. You don't return desperate for validation. With strength, with truth, and that kind of clarity, it changes everything. Silence. It's misunderstood, mismatched and mastered by few in a world where we're encouraged to speak louder, shout our opinions, prove our worth with words and presence, like surrender. But the truth is, real power often enters the room with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't come weakerly, from clarity, from strength, from knowing you don't need to be low to be heard. We've all experienced moments where we answered ourselves to explain what we meant, to respond to criticism. Clap back at someone who misunderstood us, hurt us, or treated us unfairly. The human instinct is to jump, protect, assert, and that's okay. We're wired to want to be seen and heard. But there's another kind of power, a deeper one. The kind that doesn't need because it knows the truth doesn't become less true just because it goes unspoken. Let's take the story of Dev, a talented, highly competitive agency. Deva wasn't the loudest in the room. He didn't interrupt others to be heard. He didn't brag about his projects, of every little win. While others posted updates about every success, Dev just quietly kept building, creating, growing. There was a time when a coworker tried of his major design ideas in a meeting. All eyes turned to Dev, waiting for a reaction. He could have argued, could have embarrassed the guy. Instead, he said his manager said nothing. That silence spoke louder than a heated argument ever could. It said, I know what I did, I know who I am, and after the meeting, Dev's manager pulled him aside and said, that silence, that was powerful. Everyone saw the truth from word. You see, when you speak from ego, it creates noise. But when you sit in silence with confidence, it creates impact. We live in an age has a microphone. Everyone has something to say, but not everything needs your reaction. Not every moment requires your defense. Not every deserves your energy. And not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Maybe that was story, because sometimes the most commanding president rise to the bait, the one that pauses, the one that stays grounded, the one that knows, I don't need to attend every argument I'm invite. It's not the absence of thought. It's the presence of self-control. Think about it in relationships. How many arguments spiral into feel the need to get the last word, to defend, to attack, to explain again and again, until no one is even listening. One person just said, I understand, and then went silent, not with a cold shoulder, but with peace, with resolve. That silence creates space. It forces the other pre-stop and reflect. It shifts the energy from confrontation to contemplation. Because silence isn't shutting down. Here's a truth that hits hard. People can't argue with silence. They can scream into it. They can project onto it, but they can't. They kind of doesn't fight. It watches, it waits, and in its stillness, it disarms everything that was meant to provoke. This is not about being passive. It's about choosing your moments wisely, about knowing that not all responses are created equal, and not every battle is worth your breath. Imagines talking behind your back, spreading rumors, criticizing your every move. You find out. The old you might rush to defend yourself, setting the record straight. But the powerful, the elevated you. You smile. You keep walking. Maybe you let them talk. Because you know these need megaphones to survive. And one day, they'll hear your silence echo louder than their words ever could. Because you chose to let your results story, your absence speak. There's a moment in every leader's life, every dreamer, every builder, every lover, every human being. When you realize then you can say nothing, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know when and how, than simply saying it. Silence is a sacred space where dignity lives. It's where pride doesn't scream. It stands. Where wisdom doesn't rush. It waits. When you use moments that don't deserve your voice, you protect your peace. You keep your energy clean. You stay above the drama. You stay in control, and you send a power out of being misunderstood, because I understand myself. So, the next time you feel the urge to defend, to explain, to react, ask yourself, or is it about ego? And if the answer points to ego, let it go. Choose the kind of silence that holds weight, the kind that calms storms, the kind that's in that silence, you don't lose power, you become unstoppable. There is a unique and undeniable power kind that comes from revenge, resent, or punishment, but the kind that quietly uncovers truth. You see, when you're constantly around unstorting, people get comfortable. They stop looking closely. They start to expect you'll always be there. Your presence becomes part of the bedpan, the fan, or the warmth of sunlight. Always there, always available. But something shifts the moment you step away. The moment your energy is no longer behind starts speaking, and it speaks louder than your words ever could. It doesn't complain. It doesn't beg to be noticed. But it debates, it creates a vacuum, a space where truth finally echoes back. Let's talk about Rhea, a high-performing woman who always went old stub. She'd stay late, cover for others, calm tensions in the office, even pick up after her teammates' mistakes. She was the glue that held her team together. No one really acknowledged it. People thought, she loves doing this. Or, she's just became invisible because they were consistent. But then, Rhea took a 2-week break, no emails, no late night fixes, no lost rescues, no office load. Small problems turned into big ones, meetings were awkward, projects got delayed. That seamless efficiency everyone took sunder vanished. Who never really vocalized her vanity, signed Motivational how every little piece of the puzzle was connected to her work. In her absence, the truth of her importance hit like a wave, not because she fought for recognition. And left behind a silence filled with lessons. That's the thing. Sometimes people standing right in front of them. Your constant presence becomes a cushion. Your reliability becomes an expectation. Maybe your giving becomes a routine. And when you move your light from a room, it forces everyone to notice just how bright it really was. Maybe this applies to more than just workplaces. The relationship you stayed in too long. The one where you won planning the dates, initiating the conversations, making the effort, you gave love, Logian again, and they barely noticed. They got used to your emotional labor. They believed you'd always be there. When you stopped texting first beat, when you stopped for someone who never showed up for you, when your good mornings went unsent and your check-in stopped arriving, at first they might have shrugged it off, maybe and felt relief. But slowly reality crept in. The absence became obvious. The truth starts to hang it all together. And now without you, they had to sit with the echo of their own effort, or lack thereof. This is the beauty and pain of absence. It's both a magnifier. It reflects to others what they chose to ignore. It magnifies your true value, not because you finally shout or quiet exit, remove the illusion of balance. You weren't just there. You were shown, never paid attention to. And When you're gone, they can't hide from that anymore. Here's what's important to understand. It's not about guilt tripping anyone. It's about clarity. It's about understanding that yours is the only way to protect it. And to awaken others is to walk away even temporarily. When you're present, people often focus on what you do. But what you have to say, reflect on who you are. Think about it in terms of family. You may be the one always organizing the get-togethers, calling to check in, being the amount the olds. But what happens when you stop? When you quietly retreat and create space, suddenly others have to deciding, was this connection real, or was it absence? Challenges people to evaluate their own contribution. Did they match your energy? Did they listen when you were speaking? Did they appreciate the small things you gave consistently? Because now in your absence, those small things feel enormous. And let's not forget about the inner trash bins when you step away. Not only does your absence wake up others, it wakes up you. It reminds you of your impact. It lets you breathe and observe. It shows you who reaches back without being prompted. Who checks in not because they need something, but because they miss your presence. You hear a lot of your care. Sometimes you need to go silent just to hear your own truth again. Because as long as you're drowning in annotations, expectations, it's easy to forget how powerful your presence truly is. When you go missing for a while, that missing your presence was never casual. It was essential. So don't be afraid to pull back. Don't feel guilty for removing your patterns that have grown used to taking without giving. Let your absence teach the lessons your words never could, because when you're no longer present, if they chose to overlook, and that truth, it can shake foundations, it can heal, it can change lives, it can rewrite relationships, all because you had the courage to go quiet and let your absence speak. In life, we often the crutch for or the fixer, the emotional firefighter, the one who always picks up the pieces. And we do it out of love, out of habit, out of a deep belief that if we care and annoy, things will finally fall into place. But what happens when you're the one who always catches the ball and suddenly you stop? What happens? The client unquietly folds and walks away. What happens is accountability. You see, sometimes your consistent presence enables ability they should have taken a long time ago. As long as you're there, fixing things, covering for their lapses, making excuses, overfunctioning, they would arise. They never have to truly see the consequences of their actions or inaction. Your support, though noble, becomes a cushion for their complacency. But more walk away. When your energy, effort, and presence are no longer freely available, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, there's a gap, a silence, a voice, and that discomfort, truth starts to surface. Take the example of Arav, a dedicated employee who always went. Maybe his teammates were late with their reports. Arav stayed after hours to fix things. When the team underperformed, he took it personally and worked overtime to ensure it didn't fail. Management loved the results, but they never saw what was happening behind the scenes. His coworkers grew dependent on him, none did their jobs, but because they knew Arav would catch everything. But one day, Arav hit a wall. He was exhausted, undervalued, and so he did make a dramatic exit. He just stopped going the extra mile for people who wouldn't walk even one for him. He still did his job, but no more than the chaos began. Projects fell apart, deadlines were missed. The cracks that Arav had been quietly seenly split open. And for the first time, his team had to own their responsibilities. They had to step up. And management, they finally saw the difference. Arav, he just the backbone. But more importantly, Arav saw the difference too. Maybe he realized that absence didn't his essential, and it forced others to carry what they've been avoiding for too long. This is the power of stepping back. When you know of fixing every mistake, others are forced to face the consequences of their actions. When you stop initiating every job if they care enough to reach out, when you stop managing everyone's emotions, they must finally sit with their own. Let's take it into relationships. Who always brings the apology, always tries to de-escalate fight, always compromises first. It becomes your role. You start believing it's your job to hold that together, but in reality, you're just protecting the other person from facing their own emotional immaturity. Now imagine that one day you don't try to fix it. You don't reach out. At first, there's confusion, then frustration, maybe even silence, but maybe eventually they'd leave themselves without your effort to smooth things over. They're forced to look at the mirror they've been avoiding. That's when growth begins. Not always story. Because here's what most people never realizing: your presence can be a shield. It can protect others from doing the work. But it removes the shield. It invites reality. There's a story in every family too. The sibling who organizes every gathering. The child who checks in on the parents, everyone together. That person becomes the emotional anchor. But what happens when they take a step back? Family members start realizing how much there's one person to do the emotional lifting. Suddenly they have to reach out, to initiate, to contribute, to care. And here's where the magic happens. And do others grow? You grow too. You stop overextending yourself for people who don't match your effort. You learn the difference between love, and space to see who rises without being asked. You allow life to reveal who values just what you do. Walking away isn't about abandonment. It's about alignment. It's about saying, I've done my part. Now it's your turn. Step back. You're not punishing anyone. You're empowering them. You're giving them the opportunity, to grow, to evolve. And if they don't, that's your answer too. Sometimes absence is the greatest test of truth. It shows who is leaning on you and who reveals which connections were rooted in balancy and which were built on dependency. So don't fear the space you create when you are. It is a mirror. It reflects effort. It exposes avoidance. It reveals truth. And most importantly, it reminds you that you carry for others. It's in knowing when to let go so they can finally carry it themselves.